Hello, and welcome back to Write America, a literary series spearheaded by author Roger Rosenblatt in an effort to bridge the great divide in our country through readings and conversations from award-winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers. My name is Bridget, and I'll be filling in for Lauren for the next 2 weeks. For those of you not familiar with us, Book Review is Long Island's largest independent bookstore. I'm so excited to be here with you for another night of Write America, this time featuring writers Julie Sheehan and Claudia Acevedo Quiones. If you missed last week's episode with Amy Hempel, Kurt Anderson, and Emily Renard, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Book Review's Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something, you can always go back and watch the episode again. Before we get started with the readings, there's a few things that I'd like to show you about Crowdcast that you'll need to know for the event tonight. Below, there's the Ask a Question feature. At the end, our writers will be answering questions. And to your right, there is the chat feature where you can talk amongst yourselves about the event. Our first reader tonight is Julie Sheehan. Julie is the author of 3 poetry collections, Bar Book, Orient Point, and Thaw. A Whiting Writers Award winner, her poems have appeared in many magazines and anthologies, including Kenyon Review, The New Republic, The New Yorker, and The Best American Poetry. Please welcome Julie Sheehan. Hello. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Bridget, and thanks to independent bookstores here and across the country.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I will let you get to it.
Fantastic. Well, maybe in honor of George Colt, and much to his chagrin, I'm going to read, unfortunately, nonfiction. It's an open letter to the writers of America. I used to call myself a poet. Now is not the time for poetry, at least not in America. Now is the time for action. We're in a historic moment. We face 2 global movements: right-wing religious fundamentalism and an increasingly violent form of strongman authoritarianism. Here, both movements are led by white men. Both are meant to benefit white men. Both pose dangerous threats to representative democracy, pluralism, and equal protection under the law. That which, in my opinion, makes America worth writing for. So don't write, act. If you're fine with minority rule, if you look forward to right-wing Christian white nationalism, then by all means, sit in a corner with your notebook and muse on the one hand, on the other. Just prepare yourself to make concessions in your work as the ideological winds dictate. Arm yourself with the moral flexibility of Ted Cruz and be ready to overlook the sudden absence of certain friends until one day you're wheeled out in front of the banquet hall so the jackbooted thugs can say, "Look, we have culture too," and point at you. Don't write, act. If you're thinking, but my gifts are intellectual and aesthetic, therefore my activism will be confined to an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper, please know that the plot to kidnap and kill Governor Whitmer was not a metaphor. No one stormed the Capitol on January 6th waving a poem. Your favorite short story with its finely drawn characters will not dissuade Derek Chauvin or Kyle Rittenhouse from taking a life. Not in a country where Dylan Roof can join a Charleston Bible study group, spend nearly an hour in discussion with other passionate readers of that great text, sit perhaps in a circle with them, a classroom arrangement recognizable to any of you academics who teach great literature with its salvific virtues. Not in a country where Dylan Roof can do those things and then pull out a gun and kill 9 people because they were Black readers, not white ones. Don't write, act. Yeats was wrong. The best are not the ones who lack all conviction. The best have been out there fighting for America. The worst are not the only ones full of passionate intensity. I urge you to find some passionate intensity of your own now, while this country is still deciding what it wants to become. Yes, Biden is president, and yes, Trump is unpopular, but decisions of the kind America is making, historic decisions that alter or maintain the social contract, unfold over time. One election returning us to representative democracy, pluralism, and equal protection under the law does not permanently ratify those values. We still await our second coming, a best or worst case scenario. On the one hand, our worst scenario, the rule of law is disintegrating before our eyes, corrupted by cops, by wealth, by a justice system that pardons financial crimes and corruption, but criminalizes race, by a hard-right Supreme Court intent on empowering a white Christian patriarchy, by a major political party that rewards those who demonize dissenters, ridicule the powerless, and brag about their depravities, from theft to sex with children, depravities that no woman, person of color, or Muslim could survive. Among Republicans, it's now popular to circulate jokes about Pinochet's strategy of tossing political opponents from airplanes, and how that might work well with Democrats or Jews or Asians or feminazis. On the other hand, our best scenario, day one of the Trump administration saw the largest single-day protest in the history of our planet, the Women's March. A year later, in 2017, waves of protesters thwarted the repeal of Obamacare. In 2018, even suburban moms, hardly a bastion of radicalism, rose up to protest children in cages and help change the cruel border policy of family separation. And all this while, Black people organized so that this past summer, despite a pandemic, Black lives mattered enough for people of all races to join the protests against state-sanctioned violence, sometimes facing police violence themselves. Our social contract, based in Enlightenment values of tolerance and liberty, won't survive without a vigorous defense. And that defense must be collective. We are fighting a well-armed minority. We must use our majority to do it. All of us, the best of us, the most of us. It won't always work. America could go the way of Hong Kong, despite their valiant mass protests of 2019, or Turkey, or Poland. But even so, let's go down swinging, whether it's umbrellas or signs. Let's go down showing up. Because while collective action might not work, it's the only thing that might, inclusive of literature. We have to try. And that means getting off our poetry sofa or leaving our writing desks to join with other Americans of passionate intensity to save our country. I'll leave you with 3 areas for revision, 3 ways to rewrite America through action on civics, social justice, or religion. And I'll put these into the chat. So I used to call myself a poet. One day I will again. But right now, I'm an activist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. We will see you later on. All right. Up next, we have a reading from Claudia Acevedo, Quiones. Claudia is the author of the forthcoming The Hurricane Book and the chapbook Bedroom Pop. Originally from Puerto Rico, Claudia's work focuses on belonging, etymology, and dreams. Her poems and short fiction have appeared or are forthcoming in the Brooklyn Rail, Salt Hill Journal, Ambit Magazine, Radar Poetry, and other publications. Please welcome Claudia Acevedo Quiones. Hi, Claudia.
Hi,
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Julie, for that. I was actually having a lot of difficulty trying to figure out what to write for today. I think Amy Hempel also mentioned this last week, that she hasn't really been writing. I'm not sure if it's for the same reasons that I haven't been writing, but I just haven't been able to bring myself to do that. I currently have like not a front-facing job. I've had the luck to be able to work from home, but at times it was just impossible for me to be able to sit down and work on a poetry collection about saints and virgins. So today I'm going to be reading a short excerpt from my first book, which is going to be published by Rose Metal Press in a couple of falls. It traces the story of my family and the ways in which the U.S. political interference, basically being a colony, has affected the way we live and also the way we recover from ecological disasters, economical disasters, and it's been happening since 1898. So it's a hybrid book. There's a little bit of poetry, there's a little bit of prose, and it's divided into 6 parts, and they all are focused around a hurricane. The one I'm going to be reading from is the part on Hurricane George. And then I'll maybe read a list poem if we have time, but this is what we're going to be doing first. Hurricane George, Guaynabo, September 21st, 1998. I learned from you that operation is a game best played by the light of the Virgin Mary candle from the dollar store while sharing the last cold can of sour soup juice. You were never more my mother than during a blackout, when you let me win at a musty board game and sleep on the right side of your bed, half cave, half anchored sailboat in high tide. That last night in September, you asked me to name the different types of clouds as we drifted. Cumulus, stratus, Cirrus, Osis, like what took my grandfather, she said, and I thought how odd, and heard you smile in the dark. I fell asleep to the whir of your breath, half happy, half scared of the surge. Hurricane George. It was one of the worst hurricanes to hit Puerto Rico since San Ciprián in 1932. It formed on September 15th, 1998, 300 miles southwest of the Cape Verde Islands. It strengthened to a Category 3 at landfall in Puerto Rico on September 21st. It caused 10 to 20 feet storm surges and dumped up to 20 inches of water, 30 inches of water. Tornadoes were reported, initially carrying sustained winds of 150 miles an hour. When it was over Puerto Rico, it weakened back to a Category 2 as it crossed the western part of the island and left around 1 a.m. the following morning. Out of the 72,605 houses affected by the storm, 28,000 or so were completely destroyed. 95% of the banana crop and 75% of the coffee crop were destroyed. 65% of all poultry were gone. The entire electric system of the island was shut down, and 30,000 people lost their telephone service. Roads were impassable due to the flooding and mudslides. The total damage is estimated at $2 billion. That was in 2019. 2 people died from carbon monoxide poisoning. A family of 4 died after a candle set fire to their house while their mother was sleeping. 1 person died from head trauma after slipping and falling while removing water from his flooded home. An electrical company employee was electrocuted while repairing a damaged cable. This next section is a quote, which I'll then translate. Al día siguiente nos regresamos a nuestro hogar. Parecía otro país. No era el barrio nuevo en el que me crié. Las casas de madera cerca de las de nosotros quedaron destrozadas, solo se podía ver el baño que era de cemento. La furia del huracán arrancó la mayoría de los árboles y ahora podía ver estructuras que en mi vida había visto, lejos de mi hogar. Nada era igual. Pasaron los días, no había luz, no había agua. Ahí supe lo que vivieron nuestros abuelos cuando tenían que lavar ropa en los ríos. También tuve que ir a buscar agua en la quebrada para bajar los baños y hasta me bañé por primera vez en ese cuerpo de agua que tuve al frente toda la vida. On the next day, we returned home. It looked like another country. It wasn't the Barrio Nuevo where I was raised. The wooden houses around us ended up destroyed. You could only see the bathrooms, which were made out of cement. The fury of the hurricane uprooted most of the trees, and I could see the structures far away from my home, structures I hadn't been able to see before. Nothing was the same. The days passed. There was no light. There was no water. That's when I knew what our grandparents had lived through when they had to wash clothes in the rivers. I also had to get water from the creek just to flush the toilets. And I bathed myself in that body of water for the first time ever, even though I grew up there. That was Luis Alfonso Oliveras Giles remembering Hurricane George in an op-ed for Primera Hora, which is a big newspaper back home in Puerto Rico in 2016. The day after Hurricane George, my mother was in good spirits. I grabbed my emergency backpack, which I always had under my bed, and a Cabbage Patch doll, and we drove around to assess the wreckage. It was rare for us to go anywhere together just because if there weren't drinks or parties or errands or other people for her on the other side, this drive was special. There was no work to be done, no school for days. It was just the 2 of us driving very slowly down and around flooded streets and fallen trees. We saw that Bebo's Café back when it was just one room was open and ate chicharrones de pollo and tostones with ketchup and mayonnaise. We then picked up my godmother, her aunt, who'd been stuck in her apartment building, and waved at merengue singer Doña Rosario, who was having a few beers with friends on the hood of a car in the complex's parking lot. That's the end of that section. I think I have time. I think so. So I will read you one of the few poems I've been able to write during the pandemic. This was more of a dare from a friend who moved to the other side of the country after losing his job. It's titled Scott's Not Here, but It's Okay. It's a Liz poem that basically goes nowhere. So I hope you're not bored to death by this. When Scott isn't ripping off my bodice in a burning fit, he's chopping up McConnell's jowls for $2,000 salad. When Scott isn't driving 1,800 miles to Brooklyn to run his fingers through my hair, he's starting the Denver chapter of Neighbors in Action and nothing but Carhartt overalls. When Scott isn't adding to our shared Google spreadsheet of baby names, he's advising our mayor on vaccination strategies for Kings County. When Scott isn't looking into companion burial plots overlooking the Pacific, he's throwing red paint at the face of every Confederate statue in the South over summer break. When Scott isn't painting me a Kincaid with his tongue, he's living in a van with a Swedish wife and 2 white-haired children. When Scott isn't forsaking all others, he's trying for an ethically non-monogamous relationship with his arms dealer. When Scott isn't counting every mole on my back, he's in the hospital with a stab wound. When Scott isn't running from the guards with me at the MoMA, he's putting tiny hand sanitizers in all the mailboxes on his street. When Scott isn't trying to get us a reservation at that new mochi restaurant, he's joining the Mile High Club with a socialist welder he met on Bumble for the bit. When Scott isn't taking his mask off for me, he's joining the Peace Corps. When Scott isn't waiting for the pregnancy test results for me, he's quitting the Peace Corps and writing a piece for The Atlantic about their ties to colonialism, and it takes up all of his free time. When Scott isn't pulling a splinter out of my big toe with tweezers, he's tapping away at his keyboard in his office at that nonprofit place. When Scott isn't checking my body for deer ticks, he's teaching the neighbor's niece how to ride a bike up a hill with confidence. When Scott isn't taking my grandma to physical therapy, he's at jail support. When Scott isn't picking up my interview pantsuit at the dry cleaners, he's at jury duty and not guilty, Your Honor. When Scott isn't saving me a seat at our mutual friend's violin recital, he's at the car wash thinking about how it's like someone threw spaghetti at a tornado. When Scott isn't eating baguette with me in the park at midnight, he's camping out in his backyard to see the meteor shower, and there's no reception there. When Scott isn't co-hosting our barbecue, he's simply building a telescope from scratch. When Scott isn't arguing with me about the most humane way to kill a rat, he's fixing the carburetor of a '65 Mustang he named Lucy, and the radio's on real loud. When Scott isn't leaving his keys at my place, he's stripping the lead paint off our dream house's attic walls. When Scott isn't having a silent coffee break with me while staring out the bay windows, he's looking into flights to Costa Rica just in case we can get inoculated soon. When Scott isn't explaining tax credits to my mother over the phone, he's running around the cul-de-sac until there's no water left in his body, and that's why he never cries. When Scott isn't doing it for me, he's polishing his great-grandfather's silver letter opener before using it to open the 10th ACLU membership renewal letter he got this month. When Scott isn't growing a mustache in November, despite my requests not to, he's walking to CVS to get a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos and a box of bearskin Trojans for later. When Scott isn't telling me his dreams, he's replenishing the bird feeder for Sophia, Dorothy, and Blanche, his adopted sparrows. When Scott isn't calmly going over the differences between Cro-Magnons and humans over Zoom dinner, he's probably just taking a massive dump. When Scott isn't getting too drunk off Ron del Barrilito with me, he's signing up for a rally driving course. When Scott isn't reminding me of the times he let me into dark corners to whisper things into my mouth, he's folding every sock pair he owns into neat sushi rolls. When Scott isn't trying to recall how many moles are on my back, he's in the middle of a Godard movie with his bros, and they really, really get into it. When Scott isn't fusing into the carpet, he's paying his credit card bill with one eye closed. When Scott isn't texting me every holiday to say that he's thinking of me, he's eating for the first time after 5 days of meditative fasting. When Scott isn't calling me from Trader Joe's because he saw Jesus on an artichoke, he's shaving his head with a straight razor, patting it, and spraying it with rose water. When Scott isn't looking for excuses, he's asking his reflection, "What color is your parachute?" When Scott isn't tagging me in his Instagram archive picture, he's getting off his pickup truck and stopping traffic so that a turtle family can cross the road. When Scott isn't sending me pictures of golden retrievers and bucket hats, he's talking to the postal worker about how bad the wildfire was, six-ish feet apart. When Scott isn't responding to my existential questions with shrug emojis, he's perfecting his vegan bolognese in his new shared kitchen, and this is fine. When Scott isn't reading my messages, he's most likely hugging his surfboard somewhere in Santa Barbara, looking at the sun come out of the water like a boy waiting for his dad to come home. That's it. Hello.
Ah, Claudia! Woohoo!
That was the only poem I've been able to write in the last
You know
few
what
months.
I wrote for this? The first thing I did was write a very similar strategy. I wrote a Twitter cento, just like lines from Twitter.
Yeah,
I can read that later if you want, but
that'd be fun. That'd be really fun.
So it brings up a question I want to ask you about, like, what is it with poetry? Why poetry? I think of as, Sylvia Plath's, jet stream, it's like blood. It's where we go when we have trauma. It's where we go when we're celebrating. Why can't we make poems right now? Is it about poetry or is it writing in general? What do you think?
I don't think that it's about writing in general. I think that I've been able to write more prose than poetry this year. Absolutely. It hasn't been for other people other than the people I work for. I think that because I'm still in the anger and because I'm still in the sadness and because I'm still feeling really uncertain about what it is that I should be doing, because I know that I should be doing something different, I can only read it.
Yeah.
I can only read it because it gives a shape to my misshapen thoughts. That's why I can write a list poem as opposed to, which is just a list, and it's not even, there's no crescendo. It's just like a list of things that I couldn't sleep one night, and I said, I'm imagining all these things this person is doing, this person I can't see, this person I don't know anymore. So I'm looking for excuses. There's like such a lack of connection. There's such a lack of mental, like the kind of stimulation that you need in order to challenge yourself with a piece of poetry, like with poetry. I feel like I don't have it because I feel like I should be doing something else. I don't know if that explains it in an articulate way, but do you like, how do you feel about it? I mean, other than you read us how you feel about it, but
yeah, I feel like it's too indirect. It's too, it just feels out of sync with our time, with this moment. And I've never felt that way about poetry ever in my whole life.
I know. I was going to talk about that because I remember taking one of your classes. To everyone who doesn't know, I took a couple of workshops with Julie when I was at Stony Brook, really rigorous, amazing workshops where I learned a lot of things that I should have known. That were incredibly hard to learn. She also taught my teaching practicum, which is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life because you have to learn backwards and try to make that make sense to other people, which is the hardest thing in the world to do. I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah, we would always talk in our classes. We would talk about writing as service, poetry as community building, and I do still believe that. I just don't know what the best way to do that is. Maybe poetry, maybe just having that name, the genre puts it in a cage. That's hard for me to get out of and like look for other ways. But when someone needs help at jail support, you go. When your friend is telling you, let's go to this protest, you go. I'm not going to sit here and write a poem about St. Agatha because St. Agatha's not here. And I don't know when she will be. She will be eventually, but everything is just, is in upheaval. And, just not just outside, but our personal lives too are all messed up.
Yeah, it's messed up. It's messed up.
We're all messed up. Yeah. And in which ways do you think your teaching has changed, your teaching of poetry?
Well, that's a really good question. I haven't actually thought about it. Teaching for me is always a slow process of thinking, oh, I'm getting somewhere. Like, okay, now I understand what I'm really after, because you're right. Teaching is backward in the sense that you're trying to figure out what assumptions you made or what gambles you took in order to, and what the craft that you practiced and mastered enough to try it at whatever level you're operating at, was identifying it and figuring out ways to get at it and finding examples of other poets using it. I guess I'm still kind of on that slow path, and that feels valid. It feels like valid work. It doesn't feel so pointless.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel teaching it has been easier than writing it then?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find like your students has the material been changing? Has the approach been changing?
Oh, I think, I think a number of students, there's a bunch of people who teach on the chat. So you guys should chime in with your thoughts on this. But I think there are people who, because of the pandemic, are practicing at giving themselves skills for self-expression that they probably wouldn't have been able to focus on in quite that isolated way that, especially undergraduates, undergraduates tend to jump right to, what is it about? I want to say this thing. And I don't care how I get there. I'm just going to get there. And, I got there, and that other poem got there. And, they're right. They both, the moral of the story is, but I think maybe craft, I, at this point, assign mostly pretty exercise kind of assignments. I don't put pressure on people to come up with their life's work in a workshop. So maybe that sort of sense of just having isolated something that you're fooling around with.
Yeah.
It's something you can do in an apartment by yourself,
Especially, if you're in an apartment by yourself with your family and you're not getting along well with your family, you probably have students that share a place with a dozen people, and the only little break they have, 2 a.m, grab a journal, write whatever the hell you want. And it really does help. So I do find that having those tools and reading other poets helps people in that way through this pandemic, in a way that maybe it wasn't as urgent before. Even though we've been talking about how, poetry is not going to change things on a global scale right now, but it can definitely change the way we feel about ourselves when we feel like we can't escape. And maybe that's not us. Maybe it's people who don't have the option of leaving whatever space they're in.
And there are incredible tales of hardship. A student who was living in a treehouse in order to keep from accidentally infecting a frail parent, and just people with multiple family members who died, and just that inability to, again, collectively
can't mourn together,
go through a mourning ritual. I mean, you can mourn, you just can't do the social, the ritual.
Mm-hmm. Just hugging someone.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about the politics of Puerto Rico and what you see as the future of a truly devastated, a community that infrastructure never got back. They never got back a fully functional system of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there has been. It's just been one thing after another. I'm probably not the best resource for current information of like what exactly is going on. I'm thinking of flying.
You're going to be
home,
living there. Yeah.
I'm
so
going
what
to
do you
be
expect?
moving there soon. I only get bits and pieces from what my family members tell me. They basically just tell me the same thing they've been telling me the whole time. Yeah, I'll ask my mother what's happening. She's like, oh, curfew at 10 and I can go to the movies and the infrastructure's bad, but it has been for many years. But there are really wonderful organizations that are just grassroots that are helping out. Departamento de la Comida, that's an example. It's basically like a soup kitchen that serves like organic, good food to people in their community. There are mobile libraries. There are arts organizations. There's a lot of work, a lot of beautiful art being done right now. It's very much not a dead place. It's there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's all sort of starting to bloom right now. I think it's called Society for the Americas. One of their new curators is Natalia Salgado, who's another Puerto Rican who moved here a few years ago. And she's been doing great work. She recently put up an exhibit on carpetas, which were files that the FBI kept on students at the University of Puerto Rico. They basically just tracked them their entire lives because they were separatists. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that is born from this kind of negligence and corruption and a lack of interest from the government, but there are a lot of young people. I have a lot of friends who are doing wonderful things out there. So I honestly don't know what's going to be happening with the economy. I don't know what's going to be happening. Even the elections just now were a complete mess. There were lots of votes not being counted. People volunteered to go and count these votes because
somebody has to do it.
People are just like, I will go to the stadium and just sit there for days to try to make this work. So I'm definitely not the best person to properly inform the nice people in this chat. But I can definitely look for links and names of places that would have more of this information.
And report back your experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for how long I'll be there, but I'm definitely going in May. My mother, like you said, has been shielding me from a lot of it. Right after Maria happened, I was like, what do you need? What do you need? She just wanted those Diet Cokes. She ran out of Diet Cokes. I think you read that in my book. They never got to her. And I was
no, because not enough volunteers showed up at the post office to do the sorting.
To give her hers. Anyway. My goodness. So she's like, you just keep going. Everything's fine. But also, this is not new. It's not new. It's been happening forever. In every possible way, medical experiments, you name it. I think when was it? I can't remember the exact 50s or 60s. More than 30% of women of childbearing age were sterilized.
Jesus.
And this is all coming back because people are not. They don't trust medicine, and it's for a reason.
Right.
You know, your aunt got sterilized against her will. You know, it's just so seeped into our lives that I think you just have to work. Oh, look, my friend Alana coming through.
Alana, yay!
Alana, the La Brega, La Brega podcast, an episode about La Carpetas. Yeah, that's the exhibit that we were just talking about. Actually, let me write down. Sorry for doing this in the middle of the.
Miranda Beeson's had a couple of comments about teaching poetry and how they can, and writing poetry coming from experience in the world, which is exactly what we don't have. So you take that and you add it to Gail's comment about it's hard to capture the moment when you're in the middle of it. If the moment is a moment of sensory deprivation and a kind of profound existential boredom, and you're in the middle of it, well, no wonder the muse has fled. The muse is, you know.
I never believed in the muse, but
if there were a muse, she'd be out of here.
She's gone.
Yeah.
She's sunning herself in Greece.
Creative nonfiction and nonfiction, why can that come forth without experience in the world, while in the emotional morass of not just the pandemic, but our sort of political climate?
I think it's facts. I think it's objective facts that affect everyone. I think the inclusion of that makes all the difference. Yeah.
Facts are reassuring.
Facts are reassuring. They also don't change much, but they do if you listen.
No, they don't. They don't change. They don't. They're not trying to persuade, and maybe that's kind of a relief, because even a poem without any particular sort of, with a political agenda, a poem with no political agenda, and maybe even not much of an idea, mostly a mood and sort of an emotional center. Even that's an act of persuasion. A metaphor is only as it's persuasion. That's what it's doing. It's persuading us.
I'm telling you how to look at something the way I look at it.
Yeah. See this as this other thing. So.
Did you say we're going to read your...
I'll read my Twitter cento.
Yes.
I called Star Black up to say, is it cento or cento? And I knew Star Black would know. And she was like, well, I say cento. But you know what? Maybe it's cento.
I think it's cento.
So she was no help at all. Cento then. All right. Yeah. Here it goes. You're lucky Black people want justice and not revenge. The old Jim Crow looks a lot like the new Jim Crow. Everything is wrong with this scenario. Everything. Horrifying. One never knows when a bag of frozen peas might open fire. It's not Christianity people don't like. It's Christians. How do I get a religion? It seems like I'd have more rights if it feels like I'm dumber when I leave this place. Good thing you stole a seat. Trump's wives were immigrants, proving once again you get what you vote for. A lazy terrorist told me to kill myself, and I was like, do I have to do everything around here? Why don't I earn a better quality of antagonist? They'll do jobs Americans won't. This weekend is brought to you by #BidenCalm. Twitter cento.
I should start doing those every day.
You can do them. They're craft. It's arts and they're cut and paste. They're like airplane glue and, scissors.
Yeah, with students, I loved just like bringing a bunch of books and having them copy lines that make sense to them. And from my tarot descriptions.
Yeah.
Round stuff comes out of it, and you can derive meaning from anything. So, yeah.
Do we have any questions from the house? We have one unanswered question, a question from George Colton and Fadiman, yay, two gods of nonfiction. So that's why I was a little worried when I saw him in the chat. You've alluded to how your writing has changed during this past year or two. How has your reading changed? Awesome question. Claudia, how has what you read changed?
I read a lot less. I've been reading more in Spanish, thanks to my cousins who have been sending me books in Spanish. There's this great author, Mayra Santos Febres, who wrote a book of poems that's called Huracanada. It's about hurricanes, about the aftermath. I'm reading some short stories also by some other Puerto Rican writers. I also have a lot of teacher friends. So most of what I've been doing is getting my friends to tell me what to read, as opposed to going on LitHub or like New York Review of Books or anything like that, I've discovered a lot of poets that way. I hadn't read Saeed Jones until Grace Dilger, who's in the chat, gave me their memoir. Hi, Grace. So I think it's been that. Alana, the one who came through with the podcast name, she's also been sending me some books. She's a librarian, so she knows her stuff. I think I'm just depending on other people more than I used to, because I don't think, because I was trying to get used to the Western canon so much when I moved here. I ended up reading a lot of, T.S. Eliot and a lot of Elizabeth Bishop, whom I love. She's, absolutely adore her. But it was incomplete. And ever since leaving grad school, I've just been trying to reach out to other people to tell me what's good and tell me what's relevant, because I'm not going to be reading Yeats until I'm 75. That's just not a thing.
He's wrong.
And he's wrong.
And he's wrong. I love Yeats.
Me too. But
no, but I have also been, I guess, I've been reading more nonfiction, I think. Mm-hmm. And relying on friends' recommendations. I hadn't noticed that Michelle Whitaker was like, you have to read these two books. So I'm just finishing Layla Long Soldier, Whereas. That's really wonderful. I'll put it in the chat. And I just got Eula Biss's new book of essays. So I'm looking.
Oh, cool.
Long Soldier. Actually, everyone should put a recommendation in the chat and we'll take them home with us.
That's true.
Yeah. We're talking to you, audience.
Yes, audience.
So you already got us started, Julie. You asked the first question, and we actually have another question. This is from Miranda Beeson. She asked, when you can't write, what do you do?
Twitter centos. I post on Twitter and read. You can always read.
Yeah. When I don't write, I'm just going to be very honest with you. I just watch a lot of movies.
What movies do you watch?
What?
What kind of movies do you watch? What have you seen anything with lately?
I'm a big Criterion Channel fan. And when you're depressed or you feel like you can't really do much else, that's what I do. I write a lot of my journal. I have a lot of nightmares. I'm getting very TMI here. And I use a lot of that for stories or poems. So that's really what I do most of my writing in the morning and late at night. And then I have a 9 to 5 that has been taking up a lot of my time. So
drawing is good too, even just doodling, drawing badly. It moves your hand. You're holding a writing instrument, even if you're not using it to write something. It kind of keeps the muscle alive, even if it's not making words.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking forward to having something to edit in the fall. That's when I'm going to start editing the book. So I think having that will help me get the momentum started again.
Another question, Claudia, you may have seen this last week. We asked this last week, and it was who do you write for? Who's the audience you envision when you're writing?
I'm going to piggyback off of what Emily said. Even though she was quoting someone else, and I don't remember who it was, but I think it's how I love people and how I love myself. And I do it because I want friends and I want people to feel things with me. So that's about it. I was like a very lonely little child, and I think that thinking, oh, maybe someone will read this made me feel a lot better, and I feel the exact same way. When someone tells me that something I wrote made them feel whatever it was, even if it was angry, that's great. Thank you. So that's it.
I was so relieved when I found out that I was not the only reader who felt like I was, friends with Shakespeare. Like all my friends were dead people, and it was like, cool. And it was when I went back to graduate school, and one of the people I studied with, you could just tell that his friendships, he was just as enthusiastic about, hooking up with Proust for a coffee as he was with hooking up with you for a coffee. It didn't matter, dead or alive, didn't matter. And it was like, that is exactly how I feel about reading and writing. Like, I don't even care if stuff gets read now. Like, who knows? Someone may read it, 200 years from now. Like, that's fine. Like, the reader could be not born yet.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
Could be dead 200 years. There's that too.
Who knows?
Because it works both ways.
We're for one more question. We have a couple minutes left until 8. This is for both of you. If you weren't a writer, what do you think you would be doing for work?
I was just having this conversation with another writer friend today. We both of us have, we're doing our taxes. We have Schedule K. Like, neither of us, what is a Schedule K? I don't know. We got one in the mail. So we're puzzling over these Schedule Ks and, researching them. And we're starting to get really into it. So we were joking today about how we would be accountants. We would totally be accountants. And maybe this is a pandemic thing, and it's just like doing a Twitter cento, that it's like you're lining up the numbers, you're putting them in the boxes. It's all very mechanical. And something about that is really appealing. So I would be an accountant if I weren't.
You can't mess it up. You're fitting, in a way, it's sort of it's poetry. It's sort of like poetry. You're giving things order. You're packaging them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not crazy. I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy. I get it. I get it. I want to be I want to own a bookstore / bar / venue. But that will be in a million years, when I can afford a little house somewhere with a storefront. But I would love it. I want to be an old woman with a bunch of chickens and dogs, and get people drunk and or high on coffee and give them a place to read. And it's going to be called Dogs, and I'm going to have a dog called Bookstore, which is my favorite thing about this plan.
In my head, I'm like, okay, maybe I can call my boss and I can say, listen, I have this idea.
Come work with me.
A dog, booze. I think we can make this work. I think
Sandwiches. We can have sandwiches too.
we have sandwiches. We have a cafe. We have coffee. We have sandwiches. We have a great cafe. But I think adding alcohol and various animals might help. That's a whole new layer of book review. Okay, well, thank you guys both so much for being with us. This was so great, and thank you for taking the time to spend your evening with us. And also thank you to Roger Rosenblatt for making the series happen. We are so lucky to have Roger as a friend. And don't forget to visit bookpreview.com to get your hands on signed copies of participating writers' books. We hope to see you right back here next Monday at 7 p.m. for readings from Natalie Diaz and Daniel Halpern.
That's going to be amazing.
It's going to be a good one. So yeah, thank you guys so much. We will
Thank
see
you, noble host.
We'll see you
Bye,
next week.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.